So, picture the physiological state of a human being who is, like, preparing for a head-on car crash.
Right, just pure panic mode.
Exactly. The hypothalamus sends this massive alarm to the adrenal glands. Epinephrine just floods the bloodstream. Your heart rate instantly doubles, pumping all that oxygen-rich blood away from your digestive tract and straight into the major muscle groups.
Your pupils dilate too, right? Just to take in more light.
Yeah, exactly. The body is entirely primed for extreme, explosive violence. Now, imagine taking two human beings in that exact biological state, locking them inside a 32-foot octagonal cage, and, well, telling them the only way out is to physically dismantle the other person.
You would honestly expect absolute anarchy, like a complete breakdown of human decency.
Right, and 99 times out of 100, in literally any other context, you'd be right. When you push the human nervous system to that absolute limit, the primitive brain just takes over. It's pure survival.
But the world of elite mixed martial arts is, it's that 1% where that rule just totally breaks down.
It really is. So, welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are immersing ourselves in the staggering, just paradox-filled events of UFC 328, which went down on May 9, 2026 at the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey.
Yeah, and our mission for you today is to decode the immense duality of this specific event, because it's wild.
It's so wild. We are looking at a timeline that starts with unprecedented armed security, deeply personal death threats, and a literal physical brawl at a press conference.
Yeah, and yet that exact same timeline ends, what, just 48 hours later?
Yep, 48 hours. And it ends with one of the most profound displays of mutual respect in combat sports history. We're talking a fighter wrapping a championship belt around the waist of the man who just beat him, and, even a marriage proposal on a canvas literally stained with human blood.
It's just a crazy juxtaposition. And to untangle how we get from point A to point B, we've pulled together a really fascinating stack of source material for you.
Yeah, we went through a lot.
We did. We've synthesized comprehensive event recaps, really rigorous round-by-round fight analyses, sports betting breakdowns, and honestly, perhaps most importantly, the actual codified, unified rules of mixed martial arts.
Because we aren't just here to give you, like, a play-by-play of the violence.
Right, no. We are going to examine the underlying mechanics of how this sport's incredibly rigid, almost sterile rule set actually manages to contain, measure, and, ultimately neutralize such raw human chaos.
So let's just start by analyzing the environment where that chaos first boiled over. This Thursday afternoon, right? The pre-fight press conference. Long before anyone has taken their hands or even put on gloves.
Right.
The main event features the undefeated middleweight champion Khamzat Chimaev against the former champion Sean Strickland. And the animosity here wasn't just, your standard fight promotion trash talk.
No, it was way beyond that.
It was so highly combustible that the UFC implemented security protocols that looked, honestly, more suited for a diplomatic summit in a war zone than a sporting event.
The visual alone was staggering. Typically, you see a handful of oversized security guards in black polo shirts.
Yeah, the usual crew.
But for UFC 328, the promotion brought in heavily armed police officers. We are talking tactical gear stationed strategically all around the stage and the perimeter of the venue.
Wow.
And furthermore, the event organizers just didn't trust the basic geography of the room. They actually, actively segregated the ticket-holding fans.
They split the crowd.
Yeah, they forced Chimaev's supporters to one side of the auditorium and Strickland's to the opposite side, creating this physical no man's land in the center aisle just to prevent crowd brawls.
That is insane. What really struck me in the event recaps, though, was the choreography of the security. Because they didn't just show up and stand there.
Right, they had a plan.
A literal rehearsal.
Oh.
The armed police and the private security teams actually ran practice drills earlier in the day. They rehearsed the biomechanics of how to physically separate 285-pound professional fighters who might, suddenly lunge at each other.
They practiced the stare down, which is just crazy to think about.
And when it came time to seat the fighters at the long table on stage, the promotion completely refused to put Chimaev and Strickland adjacent to one another.
Yeah, they had to engineer a human buffer zone. And the irony of who they chose for that buffer is just remarkable.
Who did they use?
They took the two fighters from the co-main event, so that's flyweight champion Joshua Van and challenger Tatsuro Taira, and seated them directly between the two middleweights.
Oh my God.
So you have these two 125-pound athletes who are, preparing for their own high-stakes world title fight, essentially being used as physical sandbags to absorb the collateral damage if two men 50 pounds heavier decided to throw hands over the microphones.
That is such a wild visual. Now, regarding the actual verbal warfare that took place across those microphones, we need to pause here and set a clear parameter for you, the listener.
Very important point here.
Yeah. The 30-minute exchange that followed involved highly sensitive, geopolitical, religious, and intensely personal childhood trauma. We are acting strictly as a lens for the source material here.
Exactly. We're not taking sides. We aren't evaluating the morality or, endorsing any of the viewpoints expressed by these guys.
Right. Our goal is simply to map the psychological battleground that led to the physical one.
Because the tactical nature of the insults is what's relevant to the fight breakdown. These weren't random curses. They were highly targeted attempts to break the opponent's psychological foundation.
Definitely. Strickland's strategy was to attack Chimaev's political associations and his physical resilience. He zeroed in on Chimaev's highly publicized relationship with Chechen leader Khamzat Chimaev.
Right.
Strickland characterized Chimaev as a man who fled Russia for Sweden, only to return and, in Strickland's exact words, whore himself out to a dictator. He really mocked the dynamic, taunting Chimaev by asking if he should call his daddy Kadyrov to get permission to choke him out for a luxury vehicle, specifically a G-Wagon.
It was a deliberate attempt to strip away Chimaev's autonomy, to paint him as a subordinate rather than a champion.
Yeah.
And then Strickland just pivoted to attacking Chimaev's physical identity. Like a few years ago, Chimaev suffered a severe bout of COVID-19 that actually led him to briefly announce his retirement from the sport due to lung issues.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, so Strickland weaponized this medical history. He contrasted it with his own near-fatal motorcycle accident, shouting that he nearly lost his leg and never once thought of quitting, whereas Chimaev got the, quote, common cold and tried to run away from the sport.
Man, that is heavy. And Chimaev's counteroffensive was equally calculated and arguably even more personal. He basically bypassed politics and went straight for childhood trauma.
Yeah, he did.
Sean Strickland has spoken publicly in the past about the severe physical and psychological abuse he endured from his father growing up. And Chimaev just used this as a bludgeon.
It was brutal to watch.
He repeatedly pointed at Strickland, telling the crowd that Strickland's father beat him every day, claiming that Strickland has deep mental problems because of it and, mocking him for crying about that.
The psychological cruelty of that tactic is intense. Chimaev was trying to trigger a regression, trying to make the former champion feel like a helpless child again.
Exactly.
He repeatedly told Strickland, "I'll be your daddy in the cage. I'll be your daddy all day, every day." And this was interspersed with literal, explicit death threats.
Yeah, Chimaev challenged Strickland to pull out a gun and shoot him, screaming that he was going to take Strickland's head off and that he would be dead in 2 days. Which makes the UFC CEO Dana White's decision-making at the end of this 30-minute psychological torture session so bizarre.
Oh, the face-off decision.
Yeah. A reporter actually asks him if they're going to do the traditional face-off where the fighters stand nose-to-nose for the cameras. And White looks at the heavily armed police, looks at the two men who have just threatened each other's lives, and jokes at the crowd, "According to my therapist, I'm a sociopath, so why would I not want to have a face-off here today?"
It's the promoter's instinct overriding risk management. The visual of that face-off is the core marketing asset for the pay-per-view.
But the risk management failed spectacularly. The fighters step up, the SWAT team closes in, forming a tight perimeter, Chimaev and Strickland lock eyes, and then, well, the system breaks.
Yeah.
Without breaking eye contact, Chimaev launches this sudden full-speed leg kick that connects squarely with Strickland's thigh.
The eruption was just instantaneous. The rehearsal those security guards did earlier in the day was immediately put to the test.
Did it work?
Barely. It took a dozen men, including the armed police, to intercept a completely enraged Sean Strickland. They literally had to drag him backwards, his heels skidding across the stage, just to prevent a full fistfight from breaking out in front of the world's media.
Wow.
And Strickland immediately took to X, formerly Twitter, while likely still backstage, posting that the surprise kick was exactly what I expected a coward to do.
Looking at the biology of that moment, I've always found the concept of pre-fight brawls so fascinating from a purely physiological standpoint.
Oh, absolutely.
When Strickland gets kicked and tries to charge through a dozen SWAT officers, his body is executing a massive adrenaline dump. His adrenal glands are flooding his system with cortisol and epinephrine. His liver is dumping stored glycogen into his bloodstream for immediate energy. But here is the critical flaw.
The actual fight isn't for another 48 hours. That is the ultimate biological tax of a press conference brawl. The human body is just not designed to sustain that level of hyperarousal. Once the thread is separated, the parasympathetic nervous system kicks in to bring the body back to baseline, but it usually overcompensates.
You crash.
You experience a severe hormonal crash. Your central nervous system gets completely fatigued.
Yeah, the glycogen stores are depleted. The cortisol stays elevated, which disrupts your sleep cycle that night. Fighters who suffer massive adrenaline dumps on a Thursday often report feeling like they are moving underwater by Saturday night.
Their muscles feel heavy and their lactic acid threshold just plummets.
It really raises the question, doesn't it? Does Chimaev's surprise kick actually serve a tactical purpose by forcing Strickland into a biological crash? Or does it risk depleting Chimaev's own energy reserves?
It's a massive gamble for both men, honestly. While a prime Mike Tyson used intimidation to paralyze his opponents with fear before the bell, uncontrolled rage is a serious liability in modern mixed martial arts.
Why is that?
MMA is simply too complex. If you are operating on pure emotion and depleted glycogen, you lose access to the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for tactical planning, spatial awareness, and real-time problem solving. And as the rulebook clearly dictates, you cannot win at the elite level without intense tactical planning.
Which actually serves as the perfect bridge for us. Because once Saturday night arrives and the heavy metal doors of the octagon lock shut, the environment shifts completely.
It's a totally different world.
The screaming, the SWAT teams, the trauma, insults, all of that evaporates. What replaces it is a hyper-sterile clinical framework.
So let's dig into the Unified Rules of Mixed Martial Arts, because to understand how the chaos of UFC 328 was actually scored, we have to look at the math behind the violence.
Right, and the entire sport hinges on the 10-point must system. It's a concept borrowed from boxing, but applied to a vastly more complex physical environment.
How does it work exactly for those who might not know the granular details? So 3 cage-side judges independently evaluate every 5-minute round. The fighter who wins the round is awarded 10 points. The fighter who loses receives 9 points, or in cases of extreme dominance, 8 or even 7 points.
And they scored a tie.
A 10-10 round is mathematically possible, but heavily discouraged by the athletic commissions. Judges are instructed to find the differentiating factors.
The fascinating part is how they find those differentiating factors, because a casual viewer looks at a fight and judges it on like a primal vibe, who looks scarier, who is moving forward, who seems to be winning. But the rulebook doesn't care about vibes.
Not at all. It operates on a strict, cascading hierarchy of criteria. Plans A, B, and C.
Let's break those down.
The criteria are absolute. Plan A is effective striking and grappling. The official documentation explicitly states this criteria will be the deciding factor in the vast majority of fights. If Plan A is not perfectly equal, the judge cannot even look at Plan B or C.
Wow, so it's a strict filter.
Exactly. And the definition of effective is where the nuance lies. The rulebook prioritizes immediate impact over cumulative impact.
That's interesting. Let's break down the physics of what the rules define as immediate impact. When a fighter throws a strike, the judges aren't just counting the number of times a leather glove touches a face.
Yep, they are looking for kinetic transfer.
Yeah. A glancing jab might snap the head back slightly, but a perfectly timed cross to the chin causes the brain to literally slosh inside the skull, disrupting the vestibular system and causing the fighter's legs to buckle for a fraction of a second.
And the rules explicitly state that one single strike, which visibly diminishes a fighter's energy, confidence, or physical ability, outweighs 10 light jabs that only cause superficial redness.
The same strict logic applies to the grappling exchanges, doesn't it?
Yes, very much so. The casual fan often assumes that a takedown, the act of physically dragging your opponent to the canvas, is inherently a massive scoring play. But the rulebook says otherwise.
What does the text actually say?
It reads, "A successful takedown is not merely a changing of position, but the establishment of an attack from the use of the takedown."
That is such a critical distinction. So if Fighter X shoots a double-leg takedown, drives his shoulder into Fighter Y's hips, and elevates him perfectly to the mat, but Fighter Y immediately scrambles to his feet before Fighter X can land a strike or attempt a submission.
Fighter X gets almost 0 credit.
Wow.
Yeah, the act of changing the altitude of the fight means nothing if it doesn't generate offense. It prevents fighters from just playing a game of positional geometry without actual combat.
So if and only if the effective striking and grappling are deemed 100% dead even, then the judges move to plan B, which is effective aggressiveness.
Exactly. But again, the rulebook anticipates the optical illusion of forward movement. It defines effective aggression strictly as making aggressive attempts to finish the fight.
Okay, let me push a hypothetical scenario on you to test this.
Sure, lay it on me.
Suppose the bell rings. Fighter A immediately takes the center of the octagon. He puts his hands down, walks forward with a terrifying scowl, and forces Fighter B to circle backward against the cage fence for 5 straight minutes. Fighter A is dictating the entire geography of the round.
Okay.
However, while moving backward, Fighter B throws and lands exactly one clean, hard calf kick that makes Fighter A flinch. Fighter A lands nothing else. Who wins the round?
Under the Unified Rules, Fighter B wins the round 10-9 without question.
Really? Just off the one kick?
Yep. Fighter A's forward pressure and terrifying scowl are completely irrelevant under Plan A because they produce no impactful strikes or grappling. The single calf kick from Fighter B is the only effective offense of the round. The rules intentionally strip away our evolutionary bias that equates taking space with winning a physical conflict.
It is the ultimate triumph of objective impact over performative aggression. I love that. And if Plan B is also dead even, they move to Plan C, fighting area control, which is essentially who is dictating the pace and location of the match, but I imagine that is almost never utilized.
Almost never. It's incredibly rare for A and B to be perfectly tied.
Now look at the margins of these scores. A 10-9 round just means someone edged it out, but the 10-8 round is where a fight can fundamentally swing, right?
Oh, absolutely. The criteria for a 10-8 round is built around 3 pillars: dominance, duration, and significant impact.
Do you need all 3?
You don't necessarily need all 3 for the full 5 minutes. If a fighter lands a strike that causes massive structural damage, say an orbital bone fracture, and the opponent spends the rest of the round purely surviving without mounting any offense of their own, that warrants a 10-8. The judge is acknowledging that the round wasn't just lost, it was a physical dismantling.
And then there's the mythical 10-7 round.
The unicorn of MMA scoring.
Yeah, it requires overwhelming dominance to the point where the judge is essentially signaling that the referee failed at their job and should have stopped the fight. We're talking multiple concussive knockdowns or extended periods where a fighter is trapped in a submission, refusing to tap, but absorbing traumatic damage to a joint or their consciousness.
It's brutal. And alongside the scoring criteria, the Unified Rules establish strict boundaries on the violence itself. The list of fouls is a fascinating read because it shows the exact line where a combat sport ends and a life-threatening assault begins.
Right.
You have the obvious bans on eye gouging, biting, and groin strikes, but the technical fouls are where the biomechanics really matter.
Take the 12-6 elbow, for example. The rules explicitly ban throwing an elbow strike in a strictly linear downward trajectory. I think the number's 12 and 6 on a clock face.
Right, straight down.
The history of this rule is debated, but structurally, the point of the olecranon bone in the elbow, when driven straight down with the full weight of the shoulder and gravity behind it, concentrates a massive amount of kinetic energy into a space the size of a quarter.
It's devastating.
If that lands on the orbital bone or the bridge of the nose, the structural cave-in is severe. Yet, if the fighter alters the arc of that elbow strike by even a few degrees, it becomes completely legal.
It's such a fine line. Another crucial anatomical safeguard is the ban on spiking.
What exactly does that entail?
Spiking is defined as controlling your opponent's body, lifting them so their feet are pointed toward the ceiling, and driving their head directly into the canvas.
Like a pile driver.
Exactly like a pile driver. It's a maneuver that completely bypasses the muscular defense of the neck and transfers the entire kinetic shock into the cervical spine, risking instant paralysis. That's why it's highly illegal.
We also have to define what constitutes a grounded opponent, because it dictates whether you can legally kick someone in the head. And the rules have evolved here to eliminate loopholes, right?
They have. Currently, a fighter is grounded if the flat palm of one hand is on the canvas, or if any other body part besides the soles of the feet is touching the mat.
So no more fingertip stuff.
Nope.
Yeah.
You can't just lightly touch one finger to the ground to protect your face from a knee strike anymore. You have to bear weight on that palm.
It creates a fascinating dynamic where fighters have to run complex algorithms in their heads in fractions of a second. They have to assess the exact posture of their opponent's hand on the mat before deciding whether a knee to the jaw will win them the fight or result in an instant disqualification.
The mental processing speed required is just unreal.
So keep all of that in mind, everyone listening. The priority of immediate impact, the irrelevance of performative aggression, the strict physical boundaries of the violence, because when the cage doors locked for the main event between Sean Strickland and Khamzat Chimaev, all of that theory was put to a brutal 25-minute stress test.
It really was. And the opening round played out exactly as the odds makers and analysts predicted. Chimaev came out of the corner like a ballistic missile.
He didn't wait at all.
No, he didn't bother with the feeling out process. He immediately applied that relentless forward pressure, but unlike the hypothetical we discussed earlier, his pressure resulted in immediate, devastating Plan A offense.
The biomechanics of Chimaev's early wrestling are terrifying. He changes levels so fast that the human eye actually struggles to track his hips. He drops underneath Strickland's line of sight, drives through the hips, and elevates him.
He's incredibly explosive.
In the first 5 minutes, Chimaev dominates the grappling. He isn't just laying on Strickland, he is establishing attacks, landing heavy ground strikes, and forcing Strickland to carry his 185-pound frame, which rapidly depletes the oxygen in Strickland's legs.
From a scoring perspective, round 1 is a clear 10-9 for Chimaev, and honestly, depending on how heavily a judge weighed the energy depletion of those early attacks, it could flirt with a 10-8. Chimaev executed his game plan perfectly.
But round 2 is where the narrative shifts, and it highlights Sean Strickland's bizarre but highly effective defensive mastery. Strickland doesn't fight like a traditional kickboxer.
No, his stance is so unique.
He stands almost completely upright, utilizing a variation of the Philly shell defense, literally parrying punches away from his face. And despite the chaos of the press conference brawl and the absolute onslaught of round 1, Strickland's heart rate seems to completely settle.
Yeah.
He weathers the storm.
Strickland's defense relies on an incredible economy of motion. When Chimaev throws a heavy hook, Strickland doesn't leap backward to avoid it. He subtly rolls his shoulder or swats the glove away by fractions of an inch.
Right.
By doing so, he diffuses the kinetic energy of the strike without expending his own energy to retreat. And crucially, in round 2, Strickland anticipates Chimaev's level change. He drops his hips, secures underhooks, defends the takedown, and actually manages to reverse the momentum, putting the elite wrestler on his back.
Oh man, the psychological impact of taking down an undefeated wrestler is massive.
Yeah.
But more importantly, it stops Chimaev from establishing his Plan A offense. So the fight moves into the grueling championship rounds 3 and 4, and it just evolves into a bloody, exhausting war of attrition. Both men are cut. Both are bleeding.
This is where the tension in the scoring criteria becomes incredibly difficult for the judges to parse. Strickland abandons the knockout hunt and commits to a game of high-volume disruption. He starts heavily utilizing the teep, which is a straight push kick to the opponent's solar plexus.
The teep is such a brilliant tactical weapon against a wrestler. When you drive your heel directly into the diaphragm of a man who is constantly trying to change levels, you disrupt his breathing rhythm.
It takes the wind right out of him.
You force him to tense his abdominal muscles just to absorb the blow, which saps the oxygen he desperately needs for those explosive takedowns. Strickland pairs this with a relentless, piston-like jab. He is touching Chimaev constantly, racking up massive cumulative numbers.
But Chimaev just refuses to wilt. He continues to press forward, and while his overall output drops, the strikes he does land are explosive. He throws these heavy overhand rights and looping hooks that visibly snap Strickland's head back.
It's the ultimate collision of the rulebook's criteria. You have 3 cage-side judges staring at this violence. Do they reward Strickland's constant methodical duration of striking the sheer volume of jabs and teeps that control the distance? Or do they reward Chimaev's lower volume but higher kinetic impact strikes that seem to do more immediate damage?
It's so tough to call. Which brings us to the 5th and final round. 5 minutes to decide the undisputed middleweight champion of the world. And before a single punch is thrown, we see the first crack in the hostility.
Yeah.
The 2 men meet in the center of the cage, and they touch gloves.
I couldn't believe that. After the SWAT teams, after the death threats, after 4 rounds of traumatic brain impact, they touch gloves. It's a fleeting moment, but the fight immediately resumes. Chimaev shoots for one final, desperate takedown, trying to secure that Plan A grappling dominance.
But Strickland's hips are heavy. He sprawls, fights off the grip, and forces the fight to remain standing.
The final minutes are a masterclass in defensive boxing from Strickland. He continues to manage the distance with the jab. Chimaev, likely knowing the scorecards are agonizingly close, bites down on his mouthpiece and throws heavy leather.
They just stand in the pocket and trade violent punches right up until the horn sounds, signaling the end of the 25-minute war.
The statistics paint a picture of razor-thin margins. Strickland landed 123 significant strikes over the course of the fight, compared to Chimaev's 98.
Yeah.
However, Chimaev successfully executed 9 takedowns, volume of strikes versus volume of grappling.
When Bruce Buffer reads the scorecards, the judge's split decision reflects exactly how subjective the interpretation of impact can be, even within a strict framework. 2 judges score the bout 48-47 in favor of Sean Strickland. 1 judge scores it 48-47 for Khamzat Chimaev.
Strickland retains the title, and the aura of invincibility surrounding Khamzat Chimaev is finally shattered. He suffers his first professional loss.
It was inevitable eventually, but still shocking to see.
Yeah, watching Strickland navigate that fight is like watching a concrete breakwater wall taking the brunt of a hurricane-force ocean wave. Chimaev was the wave. He was spectacular, explosive, violent, and visually terrifying. When the wave crashes against the wall, water sprays hundreds of feet into the air. It looks like absolute destruction.
Right.
But when the energy dissipates and the water recedes, you look closely, and the concrete wall hasn't moved an inch. Strickland simply absorbed the kinetic energy, maintained his structural integrity, and outlasted the storm.
The efficiency of Strickland's style is what won him the fight. He didn't try to match Chimaev's explosive wave, he simply let it crash against his defense until the tide went out.
But the truly staggering part of UFC 328 isn't the tactical execution, it's the immediate psychological aftermath. The horn sounds, the violence legally concludes, and we witness an instantaneous 180-degree behavioral shift that completely contradicts the powder keg press conference we dissected earlier.
It's like a switch flipped. The 2 men, drenched in sweat and each other's blood, standing in the center of the octagon, simply embrace. They lean on each other, exhausted, holding the hug while they wait for the official scorecards to be tallied.
And it escalates from a simple hug to a gesture of profound, almost ancient martial arts respect. When Bruce Buffer announces Strickland as the victor, Chimaev, the man who lost his undefeated record, the man who screamed that he would kill Strickland just days prior, reaches out, takes the heavy gold championship belt, and personally fastens it around Sean Strickland's waist.
To understand the magnitude of that gesture, you have to understand the ego of an undefeated combat athlete. Your entire identity is built on the premise that no man on earth can physically dominate you.
Yeah.
To lose that 0 on your record is a grieving process. For Chimaev to swallow that grief in real time, take the physical symbol of his failure, and willingly crown his opponent requires a level of humility that is incredibly rare.
Strickland takes the microphone for his post-fight interview with Joe Rogan, and the transformation is complete. He looks out at the arena in New Jersey and publicly retracts the psychological warfare. He says, "I just want to apologize to my American fans, to my Muslim fans, and my Christian fans. I went too hard. I'll admit it. I respect all you guys."
Wow.
He essentially pulls the curtain back and admits the press conference was performative cruelty designed to sell the fight.
He then turns his attention to Chimaev, calling him a savage. He openly marvels at the physical durability he just encountered, telling the crowd that motherfucker would not go back. I'm hitting him with everything, and he just keeps coming forward.
This psychological phenomenon is the core paradox of the sport. How do the brains of these athletes process this? How do you rewire a genuine, visceral desire to inflict physical harm into a profound brotherly respect in the span of 25 minutes?
It comes down to the concept of shared physical trauma. In our daily lives, conflict is almost entirely abstract. We argue through screens, we trade verbal insults, we posture. The press conference was the ultimate expression of that abstract, performative conflict. Both men were projecting an impenetrable ego. But the octagon is a truth machine. You cannot bluff a left hook to the liver. You cannot fake cardiovascular endurance in the 4th round.
When you hit another human being with maximum concussive force, and they refuse to fall, and then they inflict that exact same pain upon you, the performative ego shatters. It becomes obsolete.
Exactly. You realize that the man bleeding in front of you is the only other human being on the planet who truly comprehends the depth of the physical and psychological hell you are currently enduring. The manufactured hatred dissolves because it's no longer necessary for survival. It is immediately replaced by an unspoken chemical bond forged in mutual suffering.
It's trauma bonding executed in real time under stadium lights. It is breathtaking to observe. But the narrative of UFC 328 doesn't end with the main event. The entire undercard was a tapestry of these intense human experiences.
Oh, the undercard was fantastic.
We saw biomechanical breakdowns, emotional triumphs over disease, financial life changers, and the juxtaposition of extreme violence with profound romance. Let's examine the flyweight title fight in the co-main event between the 24-year-old champion Joshua Van and the Japanese challenger Tatsuro Taira.
This fight was a phenomenal display of technical striking versus grappling resilience. In round 2, Van demonstrated why his striking is so highly regarded. He managed to find an angle and landed a massive concussive right hand directly to Taira's jaw.
It was a huge shot.
The kinetic impact was so severe that Taira's head snapped back and he collapsed to the canvas. The commentary team, including former champion Daniel Cormier, immediately noted that Taira appeared severely compromised.
But Taira's central nervous system somehow reboots. He survives a round, and in round 3, despite a mask of blood covering his face, he manages to secure a dominant grappling position. He takes Van's back and attempts a rear naked choke.
And let's look at the anatomy of this submission for a second. A proper rear naked choke does not attack the trachea. It doesn't crush the windpipe to stop breathing like people often think.
What does it do?
The attacking fighter slides their forearm across the throat, placing the bicep on one side of the neck and the radius bone on the other, compressing the carotid arteries.
Blood flow.
Right. By clamping down on the carotids, you halt the flow of oxygenated blood to the brain. If secured correctly, unconsciousness follows in roughly 6 to 8 seconds. Taira had the position, but the sheer volume of his own blood made his arms slippery, preventing him from locking the necessary friction to secure the choke. Van manages to break the grip and escape.
And Van capitalizes on that escape brutally in the 5th round. He shifts his target from the head to the body. He lands 2 devastating front kicks directly to Taira's midsection.
Those are agonizing.
A front kick to the liver, or the solar plexus, is a systemic shock. It causes an involuntary spasm of the diaphragm and causes the liver capsule to stretch, sending a massive pain signal to the brain that essentially overrides conscious motor control. The body shuts down to protect the organs. Van follows it with a right hand, and the referee intervenes, awarding Van the TKO victory.
Taira immediately protested the stoppage, driven by adrenaline, but when evaluating the totality of the damage and the physiological shutdown occurring from those body strikes, the referee's decision to preserve Taira's long-term health was widely praised.
Yeah, it was the right call.
Both men endured such an extreme physical toll that the UFC awarded them the $100,000 Fight of the Night bonus.
The distribution of wealth on this card leads us directly to the story of Jim Miller. This is a narrative that transcends the sport entirely. Jim Miller is a 42-year-old veteran fighting in front of his home state crowd in New Jersey. He faces Jared Gordon and in just 3 minutes and 29 seconds secures a guillotine choke to win the fight.
The guillotine choke operates on similar principles to the rear naked choke, but from a front headlock position, utilizing the armpit and forearm to trap the neck and compress the arteries. Miller executed it flawlessly, earning his 20th UFC finish and a $100,000 performance bonus.
But the mechanical execution of the choke is the least interesting part of this story. Miller takes the microphone for his post-fight interview, and instead of calling out a future opponent or demanding a title shot, he addresses a deeply personal battle.
Yeah, this was emotional.
He reveals to the arena that his 14-year-old son, Wyatt, had recently been fighting a rare, aggressive form of soft tissue cancer called rhabdomyosarcoma.
To be a professional fighter, stepping into a cage to face physical trauma, while simultaneously navigating the helplessness of watching your teenage son undergo oncology treatments, requires a level of compartmentalization that is difficult to fathom.
Miller told the crowd that after a grueling battle, his son was officially cancer-free. And then he shared the ethos he imparted to his boy during the darkest days of the diagnosis. He looked into the camera and said, "Millers have been called a lot of names over the years, but fragile has never been one of them."
That's just incredible.
It is a profound intersection of professional violence and the rawest form of paternal love and resilience.
It fundamentally recontextualizes the violence we are watching. For athletes like Miller, the combat inside the octagon is a highly regulated, controllable profession. The true chaos, the true fight for survival, was happening in hospital rooms.
The UFC also used this event to institute a new tier of financial bonuses. Beyond the massive $100,000 awards given to Miller and Yaroslav Amosov, who, by the way, secured a beautifully leveraged arm triangle choke in his fight, the promotion rolled out $25,000 finishing bonuses for any athlete who managed to stop their opponent before the final bell.
It's an economic incentive designed to push fighters away from safe, point-scoring strategies and toward the riskier, impact-heavy offense that satisfies the Plan A criteria of the Unified Rules. 4 fighters capitalized on this: King Green, Ateba Gautier, Grant Dawson, and Basinger Susurkaev all secured finishes to take home that extra money.
But of all the moments that occurred on this card, perhaps the most jarring juxtaposition happened during the preliminary bouts. Flyweight Jose Ochoa puts on a grueling, bloody performance to win a unanimous decision over Clayton Carpenter. Joe Rogan steps into the octagon to conduct the standard post-fight interview, expecting to ask about Ochoa's jab or his takedown defense.
Right, the usual breakdown.
Instead, Ochoa waves the analytical questions away.
He essentially hijacks the broadcast for a completely different human objective.
He brings his translator over, reaches into his corner, and pulls out a diamond ring. Standing barefoot on a canvas, literally stained with the blood of the fighters who competed before him, Ochoa looks into the camera and says, "I want to do something special for my soon-to-be wife, the mother of my child. Do you want to marry me?"
Oh, wow.
She wasn't in the arena, but media caught up with Ochoa backstage shortly after, and he confirmed that she had watched the broadcast and said yes.
The visual poetry of that moment is astonishing. You have a space specifically designed and engineered for human combat, governed by rules of kinetic impact and joint manipulation, serving as the stage for a declaration of lifelong devotion and family creation.
It perfectly encapsulates the mission we set out on at the beginning of this deep dive. Let's synthesize the sheer scope of human behavior we've analyzed from this single event. We started by dissecting a manufactured, hostile environment, a press conference engineered to generate profit through performative rage, resulting in actual physical assault and requiring armed tactical teams to maintain order.
We then decoded the incredibly clinical, rigid architecture of the Unified Rules, the math that neutralizes that rage. We explored the biomechanical priority of immediate kinetic impact over the optical illusion of forward pressure, and the specific anatomical boundaries that keep the sport from devolving into tragedy.
We watched Sean Strickland and Khamzat Chimaev subject each other to intense physical trauma, testing those very rules for 25 grueling minutes. And finally, we watched the resulting fallout. An undefeated champion voluntarily wrapping a belt around his conqueror, a father finding the words to celebrate his teenage son's survival of a deadly disease, and a man proposing marriage in the epicenter of combat.
It leaves us with a highly relevant psychological consideration for our own lives, I think. When you navigate the daily conflicts of your own existence, whether it's posturing in a corporate boardroom, engaging in toxic political debates on social media, or enduring tense family arguments, consider the environment you are operating in.
Yeah, that's a great point.
How often are you being swayed by the performative, adrenaline-fueled press conference behavior of the people around you? The loud voices, the posturing, the threats?
And more importantly, when the metaphorical cage doors finally close and the actual work has to be done, do you know the criteria by which your actions are being judged? Are you burning your energy on performative aggression, or are you utilizing economy of motion to create effective, meaningful impact?
Because as the biomechanics, the judges' scorecards, and the ultimate sportsmanship of UFC 328 so clearly demonstrated, the loudest person in the room on Thursday is very rarely the one wearing the gold belt on Saturday. The structure always outlasts the noise.
Thank you for joining us on this custom-tailored deep dive into the fascinating, paradoxical world of combat sports. We hope this exploration reminds you that beneath the surface of seemingly unhinged chaos, there is almost always a profound underlying framework of rules, respect, and shared humanity.